I can honestly say I had no idea what I was getting into. I missed out on Hellblade back in 2017, so on the eve of Hellblade 2's release, I wanted to go back and see what this thing was all about. I had some preconceived notions, and man, was I wrong. I think I was expecting something more like Dark Souls, but with more of a pure horror element. I think I'll struggle with the combat a little bit. There'll probably be a lot of jump scares and gore, and I don't know, I probably won't even finish it. That was me 3 days ago, but I've grown since then. I've been through some stuff. It's a much more thoughtful experience than I was prepared for. It's cerebral, it's paced out. There are scary elements in the game, but it's more like psychological horror. Every fear that's drummed up in the game is earned, and every fear you conquer feels earned as well. So if it's not a gory Dark Souls, then what is it? I would normally call this section gameplay, but it feels kind of weird to call it that, almost like it reduces it down too much. Hellblade does everything it can to make you forget you're playing a game. There's no health bar, no mini-map, no quest lines on the ground, there's no markers blinking off in the distance, and it still feels novel today, so I'm sure it did back in 2017. There's no sidekicks or quest givers, it's just Senua, the obstacles in front of her, and the voices in her head.
Why is she doing this?
And occasionally, warriors of the damned will appear out of thin air and you'll have to clear them out before you can advance. And running is not an option, and neither is save scumming. So here's the deal. Senua has like a rot in her right hand, and it's slowly growing up her arm. And it tells you very early on that each time you die, the rot crawls up her arm a little bit more. And if it reaches her brain, the game's over. Your progress will be lost. That scared the crap out of me, and I did die several times, and I feel like the rot was crawling up the arm at certain checkpoints in the game versus when I would die. So I suspect that maybe the rot is going to crawl up at the same points in the game no matter how many times you die, but I did not test fate. I did not want to find out the hard way that I was wrong about that theory. So I'll be the first to admit, I knocked the game down to easy mode, and I'm not gonna apologize for it. And we need to talk about this because the game defaults to a difficulty level called auto, and I think it's the first time I've played a game like this, where it basically adjusts, I think what it was doing was adjusting her damage output based on how well you're dodging and parrying and that sort of thing. So basically, if you're doing well, the game is gonna punish you and make each attack you do less damage. If you kind of suck and you're not getting your dodges in and that sort of thing, then your attacks are gonna do more damage. I did not like that. I did not feel like it was a rewarding experience like that. So when you change it off of auto, your options are easy or hard. I did one battle on hard. Again, permadeath really spooked me out on this, and I was so invested in the story, and I definitely did not want Senua's story to end before I got to the end. So yeah, I put it on easy. I'm sorry. Again, the fear of that rot creeping up Senua's arm was very real, and I took the coward's way out. For what it's worth, how I played the game will have zero impact on how you play the game, and as far as I can tell, it had very little impact on the combat as well once you're out of that auto mode. I do feel like I was doing more damage on hard mode than I was at times on auto mode, for whatever that's worth. And in hindsight, it's been a week or so since I beat the game, and from what I can tell, I don't think the number of times you die really makes any difference whatsoever. So yeah, my advice, take it out of auto mode. You can play it on hard, you can play it on easy, but the auto mode it did not feel rewarding. So about the combat, this is not a Souls-like. I don't know why I had that in my head, but this really isn't. It's a very simplified combat system. There's a heavy attack, a light attack, you can dodge, and you can block. And that's it. That's all you have throughout the game. You do have to kind of study your enemies. It's very defensive combat. Yeah, it is not complicated in any way. There's no skill tree. There's no weapons upgrades. There's no loot. You don't pick up inventory off the ground or anything like that. Now, I've complained about games before that don't really add anything new as you play, and you're basically doing the same thing at the end of the game that you're doing at the beginning. And I would say there's a little bit of that with this, but it does throw some interesting wrinkles in about 2/3 of the way through. And I mentioned some people might get a little tired of the combat by the end of the game. I have to say, I did not. I was enjoying it. I was actually getting better at the combat as it went on, and maybe it was the simplified controls that just made me focus on, certain things. But you can dodge just about anything, but a parry in this game feels great, and at times you can really do a lot of damage, on the rebound from that. So, yeah, I think you could have a complaint that it's kind of the same at the end as it is at the beginning, but again, it's not a long game. It's not like you have to do that for 30 hours. So, no, it wasn't a complaint for me. As for the puzzles, they were just the right amount of difficulty for me. There were times I was stumped, but it never lasted too long, and I never had to resort to, Googling how to get past a certain section. Okay, that's a lie. There was one part that the solution involved running through the dark past a monster that lives in the dark, and I'm sorry, that was just the one solution I never thought of trying. And each area was fairly small, and that's where kind of the small size of the developer team, it kind of shows here as far as the environment areas, because there are invisible walls everywhere. Anything you can interact with is pretty clearly marked. So with these limited tools, creating so many puzzles that are both fun and challenging is a real accomplishment. The kind of puzzles, they're like environmental things. So you'll see a shape on a door, and then you'll have to go find that shape somewhere in the area nearby, and you just have to be standing in the right place and line the things up just right, and then that's how you advance and get past that part of the puzzle. So this is the part I would normally talk about, the graphics, and I do think this game is a showcase of what graphics were capable of in 2017, but forget about that for a minute. We got to talk about the thing that really sets this game apart, and it is not the graphics. It's the audio. I can't remember a game suggesting that I play it with headphones on, but it does, so I did, and holy shit. The audio is recorded in binaural, a recording process in which sound is recorded in a way that mimics the human ears. It's also the name of an obscure Pearl Jam album, but don't even get me started on Pearl Jam. The game opens up with our hero in a canoe searching for a secret entrance to the land of the dead, and a narrator voice comes on and does what a narrator typically does until Senua, the main character, turns and looks right at the camera and says, "I can hear you." That was the moment I sat up and paid attention. That was when I knew I was in for something completely original. There are other voices gnawing at the back of Senua's mind, and they're usually ridiculing her or, taunting her. Sometimes it's encouraging, but it's rare.
Why did she do that? She shouldn't have done it. She can't go back now.
Now, I've been a creative professional almost my entire career, so I know the imposter syndrome as well as anyone. Some of these voices hit really close to home, like they were things plucked out of my own head. Is that a universal experience? I honestly don't know, so let me know if that's relatable to you or not. The soundscapes are so full of life. Well, not literally. I mean, sometimes they're more like the sounds of death, but what I mean is they convey so much information and atmosphere. There's just as much care put into the bone snaps and distant screams as there is in a gentle rain rapping against the leaves and rocks. But there's a part of the game where you're blinded and you have to follow sounds, which gave me yet another reason to be glad I was playing with headphones on. I really can't recommend that enough. Please play this game with the headphones on. And while the blindness was only in a specific section of the game, I do think it was a small part of a much larger theme. There are a lot of themes tackled here, including personal empowerment, but make no mistake, this game is about psychosis. And I've never experienced it like this in any form of media. The subject is treated with respect, and Senua is presented as a warrior. She's a hero, pushing on long after she's had any reason to believe she can succeed. As a player, you're given a tiny glimpse of how difficult it would be to live through life with psychosis, not to mention living in the brutal world based on 9th century Scotland, in a land raided by Vikings and dominated by cruel and petty gods. You find runes along the way, and each one tells fragments of stories about the Norse mythology, sometimes giving you context on your locations and enemies, but often giving you something to think about as you explore the unrelenting path into darkness. There are tales of jealousy and fear. There are gods turned blind, others who are betrayed or tortured for eternity. For Senua, her story is also told in pieces and in a non-linear fashion. I don't want to talk about the story too much because I think it's better to experience it without any context. So no spoilers here, but the ending does give you a complete picture, even if you have to piece some of it together. One theme the game didn't touch on was how great it makes me feel when you hit that like button or subscribe to the channel because you're enjoying videos like this one. Then again, this channel didn't even exist when the game launched in 2017, so I guess that makes sense. This game is available on Xbox One, Xbox Series, PS4, Switch, believe it or not, and on PC through Steam and GOG. There is no PS5 version, probably because Microsoft bought Ninja Theory in 2018. I played it on Game Pass, on an Xbox Series X, and briefly through cloud gaming on my phone. But I don't recommend this one through the cloud. The combat was just too timing specific for it, at least in my experience. Your mileage may vary. You hear Senua's breathing, and there are times she's limping forward, broken and scared. And all these voices are telling her to give in, but I'm the one pushing the stick forward. It wasn't like any experience I've had in a game before, and that's no exaggeration. I was scared for her. I felt an actual sense of doom pushing her into the next horrible scenario. The threat of permadeath in the game is real, not because I'll feel any pain, but because the journey would be over, just like it would be for any voice in her head. Because in the opening moments of the game, I came to the conclusion that I was one of the voices in her head, and that was my role as the player, to push her forward, when every other voice was mocking her or begging her to give up. That's one of the reasons this game was such a profound experience for me. It probably sounds silly to talk about sitting on the couch with a controller in my hand like this, but the pacing of the game, the sounds, the visuals, and the lack of any sort of video game interface on screen, it all adds to the immersion. It's interesting because usually when I talk about a game, I talk about it in first person. I did this or I went over there. But in Hellblade, the lines are really blurred. And once I accepted the fact that I was a voice in her head, it really changed the experience for me. I may have found the clue, but it's Senua who solved the puzzle. She's the one crawling through mud. She's the one who is in danger of being burned alive. Am I pushing Senua along, or is she pulling me? This is a game that will stick with me long after I've played it. It's full of suffering and grief and some of the best motion capture acting this side of Hollywood, and I can't believe I missed it back in 2017. I raised Senua's rot-infected right hand to give it a dark thumbs up. What the hell am I doing with my life?